This is the second part of the video that explains how to develop a pattern between a cone and a cylinder. If you just watched the previous video, you remember that we just found our points of intersection on the cone that the cylinder would make if it were to project itself into the cone. And we have that in the top and the front view. Now we need to actually do our development. So a lot of this you may remember from development of just a normal cone. Some of the steps will be the same, some will be different. So we'll just jump right into it. So the first thing I want to do is start my cone development. So I'll just enter C, and I will draw a circle from the top to the bottom, and then I will draw a line from the top of the cone just somewhere out in space here. And I'll trim off the excess of that line. And the reason I am able to do this is because the true length of that line is the same length as this line, which is the true length of a cone. So now what I need to do is I need to find the angle of my layout. So you may remember the formula R divided by S times 360. So I'm gonna do that same formula, and I will type in quick calc, and I will take some measurements. R is the base of the cylinder, or base of the cone, the radius of the base of the cone, and divide that by S, which is the true length of the long slanted side of the cone. Okay, and I will take that and multiply it by 360, and it gives me an angle of 160.996894. Now what I want to do is I want to type in RO for rotate, and I want to rotate that line around 160.996894 degrees. Okay, so I'll select the object, and I'll pick the top of the cone as my base point, and don't forget to do C for copy. And then since I want to rotate this clockwise, so the angle is negative, so I will type in negative 160.996894. Okay, and you can see that it AutoCAD drew a line rotated around that much by those amount of degrees. Okay, so now I'll trim off the excess of my circle, and you can also see that it drew it right over the top view, so I want to move that out of the way to avoid any kind of confusion. And again, you may remember me mentioning that this development can get quite cluttered if you're not careful, so you need to be very careful when you're doing your development and follow certain steps. Okay, so now I want to draw a line that bisects the arc that starts at the beginning or the top of the cone. Okay, and I'm looking for a midpoint snap. Okay, so now we have that. And just to make sure it's snapped in the correct place, I want to measure both of these angles. And I will make my precision a little higher just to double check, and I will do that one more time. Okay, and you can see those are exactly the same angle. Okay, so it did snap to the midpoint of the arc. Okay, now from here we're going to use some of the points we already found to help us with our development. The first thing I want to do is draw a circle from the top of the cone down to this magenta point, the very first point on the cone. Okay, and I will just copy this point from here over to the intersection here. Now the reason I can do that is because this magenta point, if I go to the top, is this point, and it falls right on the bisecting line, if you will. The bisecting line we just created runs from the center point of the cone down to the bottom of the cone. Okay, so, and also the length from here to here is the true length. Is the reason I'm able to do that on that one. And the same thing with the other magenta point. So we can go ahead and put that in place as well, because it also lies on the same bisecting line. Okay. Now the other ones are not quite as simple, unfortunately, but it's also not too difficult. So This green point would project over to the green lines on the lower wheel. Okay, and we need to take our circle from the top here to the intersection on the true length line. Okay, and that's where our actual green lines will project, not from the point itself, but from the true length line. So now I need to go to the top, and I need to draw a circle from the center of the cone here to the green point in the top view. And using the spline as my cutting edge, I will trim off the excess on the circle, and I'm left with an arc. And from that arc, I get an arc length, which I will transfer down to our development. And you can see here that the arc length is 1.9703. So I will draw a circle with a diameter of 1.9703. And the reason I do that, of course, is by default AutoCAD asks for a radius and not a diameter, so make sure you type in D for diameter. So I will just copy these green points to the intersection points I just made right there. And now I will erase these construction lines I just drew. Okay, and then you move down to the next one, and I will just move this same line. I know where it projects on the wheel, so I don't necessarily have to do that each time, but I do need the intersection point where it crosses the true length line, so I'll know how the radius on my circle. Okay, and I will go back up to the top view, and I will draw a circle beginning at the center of the cone to a yellow point now. Okay, and again I will trim off the excess on the outside of the spline, left with an arc length of 3.6758. Okay, and I'm working on the yellow point this time, so I will copy up the yellow. And now that I've done that, I'll erase my construction lines I just drew, and I'll repeat this process again, and I will do this all the way to the bottom. So if you have a good idea of what's going on now, you can turn off the video and start your own development. If you want to see what the final product looks like, just give me one moment and I will get that for you. Okay, so now we're working on the red line, so I will draw my circle in the top view to the red. Okay, trim off the excess. Measure my arc length. It's 4.1508. Okay, and I was working on the red point, so I'll just copy that point up here. And again, I will go through that same process. Okay. And you should be able to tell how cluttered this drawing would be if you just started drawing a bunch of lines of the same color. It would be very unlikely that you would be able to produce a correct development. So please make sure that you follow these steps. Okay. To ensure that you get a correct development. And it's also very likely you'll have to go through this development more than once. There's so many different steps to this development, so it may also be a good idea to pause the video while you're doing your work, so you can keep up with it. Maybe watch it full length one time, and then work along with the video. Okay, so now I'm on my green point, and green point up here, and I'll check my arc length there, and it is 1.8244. And I'll snap it on those intersection points I just made. And when you get done with your work, check and make sure that you have some symmetry like this. It's not going to be a circle, of course, but it should be similar to this shape. The reason you want to do this is you want to make sure that you transferred your arc lengths correctly, and you may actually want to write them down as you transfer it. It'll decrease the chance for error. But now that I've done this, I will just use a spline and just go around the points and connect all the points. To the nodes. Okay, and then I'll hit enter 3 times. Okay, and that is the development of the hole where the cylinder goes into the cone. Okay, and of course you know how to do the actual cylinder development itself. So that concludes this video on developing a pattern for an intersecting cone and cylinder.